The Goodwin Sands lie just beyond the coast of Deal in Kent, where the English Channel narrows towards the Strait of Dover. To anyone standing on the beach, they are almost invisible for much of the day. Only when the tide retreats do broad stretches of pale sand emerge above the water, stretching across the horizon before slowly disappearing again beneath the returning sea. They appear peaceful enough, yet for centuries they have been regarded as one of the most dangerous places around the British coastline. Thousands of ships are believed to have been lost here, and countless lives with them. It is a place where documented maritime history sits comfortably alongside centuries of folklore, and where the stories have almost become as enduring as the sands themselves. The Goodwin Sands extend for around 10 miles, lying roughly 6 miles offshore. They are not fixed in place, but are constantly altered by the powerful tides that sweep through the channel. Their shape changes gradually over time. Channels open and close, and banks that were safely submerged one year may lie just beneath the surface the next. Before modern navigation, this made them a constant hazard for vessels entering or leaving the Thames estuary, or passing between England and continental Europe. A ship driven from its course by poor weather or strong currents could find itself stranded with little warning. And once grounded, there was often very little that could be done. The danger came not only from striking the sands themselves, but from what followed. As the tide continued to rise and fall, grounded ships were subjected to enormous forces. Hulls twisted and broke apart under the weight of the sea, while the shifting sand buried the remains with remarkable speed. Some wrecks disappeared almost completely within days. Others lay hidden for generations before storms or exceptionally low tides exposed fragments once more. Even today, pieces of timber from long-forgotten ships occasionally emerge from the sand before being reclaimed by the next change in the tides. No one knows exactly how many vessels have been lost here. Historians generally agree that the number runs into the thousands, although the true figure is impossible to calculate. Records from earlier centuries are incomplete, and many ships vanished without leaving enough evidence to identify them. What survives instead is a remarkable concentration of maritime archaeology. Modern surveys using sonar have located numerous wreck sites beneath the sands, representing vessels from different centuries and serving as a reminder that beneath what appears to be an empty stretch of sea lies one of Britain's largest underwater graveyards. Long before geology offered an explanation for their existence, the Goodwin Sands inspired another kind of history, one rooted in tradition rather than science. According to an old Kentish legend, the sands were once fertile land. Some versions describe an island known as Lomia, while others claim the land belonged to Earl Godwin, the powerful Saxon nobleman whose son Harold would become the last crowned Anglo-Saxon king of England before the Norman conquest. The story tells of a prosperous estate protected from the sea by substantial embankments. Over time, those defences were neglected until eventually they failed, allowing the sea to flood the land and bury it beneath the channel. It is an appealing explanation for a landscape that seems to appear and disappear with every tide, but there is no archaeological evidence to support it. Modern geological research shows that Goodwin Sands are naturally formed sandbanks created by tidal movement over many thousands of years. Nevertheless, the legend has endured for centuries and remains firmly attached to the place, reminding us that people have always thought stories to explain landscapes that seem unusual or unpredictable. The historical record leaves no doubt about one thing. Whatever their origin, the Goodwin Sands are feared by generations of sailors. Medieval records refer to ships being lost here, and the maritime trade increased during the Tudor and Stuart periods. So too did the number of disasters. Merchant vessels carrying wool, timber, wine and imported goods all passed close to the Kent coast. Naval ships also used these waters regularly, particularly during periods of conflict with France and the Dutch Republic. The Channel was one of the busiest sea routes in Europe, and the Goodwin Sands lay directly across the path of countless voyages. Among the many tragedies associated with the Sands, few matched the devastation brought by the Great Storm of November 1703. The storm swept across southern England with extraordinary force, destroying buildings, uprooting forests, and causing immense loss of life on land. At sea, the consequences were even greater. Entire fleets found themselves overwhelmed by hurricane-force winds, and several Royal Navy warships were driven onto the Goodwin Sands. One of the best known was HMS Stirling Castle, a 70-gun ship of the line launched only a few years earlier, alongside vessels including HMS Restoration, HMS Northumberland and HMS Mary. She was unable to escape the violence of the storm. Hundreds of sailors perished during the disaster. Contemporary accounts describe desperate attempts to save both ships and crews, but the sea offered little opportunity for rescue. Many of those aboard were lost within sight of the Kent coast, unable to reach safety before their vessels were broken apart by the waves. The Great Storm became one of the defining maritime disasters in British history, and the Goodwin Sands were once again at its centre. Although individual wrecks have occasionally been identified through archaeology, much remains hidden beneath layers of shifting sand. Divers have recovered cannons, anchors, timber and personal possessions from some sites, while other discoveries have only reinforced how much still lies buried beneath the seabed. Each new survey adds another small piece to the history of a place that continues to guard many of its secrets. Against this background of genuine loss, it is hardly surprising that stories began to grow around the sands. Sailors have always been storytellers. Long voyages encourage the sharing of experiences, warnings and superstitions, and dangerous stretches of coastline inevitably acquired reputations that extended beyond simple navigation. Over time, the Goodwin Sands became associated not only with wrecks, but with tales of mysterious lights, strange sounds carried across the water, and ships that seemed to appear where no ship should have been. The best known of those stories concerns a vessel said to have been called the Lady Lovibond. Unlike the wrecks of the Great Storm, there is no contemporary evidence confirming that such a ship was ever lost on the Goodwin Sands. The story belongs firmly to the tradition of maritime folklore rather than documented history, yet it has become so closely associated with the sands that it is difficult to separate one from the other. Whether it grew from an actual wreck whose details were gradually forgotten, or whether it emerged entirely from local tradition, is impossible to say. What can be said with confidence is that the legend has survived for more than 2 centuries and remains one of Britain's best-known ghost ship stories. According to the traditional account, the Lady Lovibond left the Thames on the 13th of February 1748. It was said to be a celebratory voyage, with the ship's captain having recently married and bringing his new bride aboard. Later versions of the story often remark that this was considered an unlucky decision, because of the old superstition that women brought misfortune to ships. While such beliefs certainly existed among some seafarers, they were never universal, and historians have noted that attitudes varied considerably between different ports and periods. It is therefore impossible to know whether this detail formed part of the earliest version of the legend, or was added later to strengthen the story. The central figure is usually named as Rivers, the ship's first mate. He is said to have been deeply in love with the captain's bride and unable to accept her marriage. As the vessel made its way down the coast, his jealousy eventually overcame him. The legend claims that he attacked the helmsman, took control of the ship, and deliberately steered her onto the Goodwin Sands, condemning everyone on board to their deaths. It is a compelling story, but it remains just that. Despite repeated attempts by maritime historians to trace the Lady Lovibond through shipping registers, newspapers, and surviving records from the 18th century, no contemporary account of the vessel or its loss has ever been found. That absence of evidence does not prove that no such ship existed, but it does mean that the familiar narrative cannot be treated as established history. It is best understood as a piece of coastal folklore that grew alongside the very real dangers of the Goodwin Sands. The haunting associated with the Lady Lovibond appears to have developed during the 19th century. According to the legend, the phantom ship returns every 50 years, on the anniversary of its supposed loss, repeating its final voyage before vanishing once again into the channel. One of the earliest reported sightings is said to have taken place in 1798, when the master of another vessel claimed to have seen a schooner heading directly towards the sands. Before a collision could occur, the mysterious ship reportedly disappeared from view. Whether this account was genuinely recorded at the time or attached to the legend later is uncertain, and modern researchers have found very little contemporary evidence to support it. A second story, far better known, places another appearance in 1848. This version tells of observers seeing what appeared to be a vessel running onto the Goodwin Sands in dangerous conditions. Believing a fresh disaster was unfolding, lifeboats were launched from Deal to search for survivors. When the rescuers reached the location, they found no wreck, no crew, and no trace that any ship had ever been there. The account has been repeated many times over the years, although, once again, surviving evidence from this period is limited, and its precise origins remain difficult to establish. As the years passed, the legend became firmly established in collections of British ghost stories. Writers repeated the tale from one generation to the next, and each 50th anniversary attracted renewed interest. By the time 1998 approached, newspapers and broadcasters had revived the story, reporting that the Lady Lovibond was supposedly due to make another appearance. A number of people watched the waters off the Kent coast that February, curious to see whether Britain's most famous ghost ship would return. Nothing unusual was reliably reported. For some, that was enough to dismiss the legend entirely. For others, it made little difference. Folklore has never depended upon proof in the same way that history does. Stories survive because they become part of the identity of a place, passed from one generation to the next regardless of whether they can be verified. The Lady Lovibond has become part of the Goodwin Sands in exactly that way. The phantom schooner is not the only tradition associated with these waters. Over many years there have been occasional reports of unexplained lights seen over the sands during darkness or poor weather. Such accounts are difficult to interpret. Before modern navigation, lights from distant vessels could easily be distorted by changing atmospheric conditions, while unusual reflections across the sea sometimes created convincing illusions. Without detailed contemporary evidence, it is impossible to know what individual witnesses may have experienced, and most historians regard these reports as part of the wider body of maritime folklore, rather than evidence of anything supernatural. Another enduring tradition speaks of church bells heard ringing beneath the sea. This story is usually linked to the old legend of the drowned island said to have occupied the site before it was claimed by the Channel. It is a familiar theme in British folklore, appearing in several coastal legends where communities were believed to have been submerged. There is no archaeological evidence for a lost settlement beneath Goodwin Sands, nor has any natural explanation ever confirmed the supposed sounds. Even so, the image of bells echoing from beneath the water has remained one of the more evocative stories attached to the area. Perhaps that is because the Goodwin Sands do not need embellishment to seem remarkable. Their history is already one of constant change, hidden wrecks and genuine human tragedy. Archaeologists continue to study the remains preserved beneath the shifting sands, while modern navigation systems still treat the banks with respect. Although technology has greatly reduced the risks faced by today's mariners, the Goodwin Sands remain an active hazard, carefully marked on every nautical chart and constantly monitored as their shape continues to evolve. Standing on the Kent coast today, it is difficult to imagine the fear these waters once inspired. Ferries, cargo vessels and fishing boats continue to pass through the channel, guided by technology unavailable to earlier generations. Yet beneath those same waters lie the remains of ships whose voyages ended here centuries ago. Some have names and histories that can still be traced. Many more remain anonymous, their stories buried beneath layers of sand that shift with every tide. Whether the Lady Lovibond ever sailed at all is something we may never know. The evidence available today suggests that her story belongs to folklore rather than recorded history. But that does not diminish its place within the traditions of the Kent coast. Like the tale of the drowned island and the stories of distant bells carried across the sea, it reflects the way people have tried to understand a landscape that has claimed so much and revealed so little. Thank you for listening to Ghost Tales by the Fireside. If you enjoy these stories, you can support the podcast and get access to MP3s over on Buy Me a Coffee. They're £1.50 each, or free if you're a member. You can find everything at ghosttales.co.uk. You can also follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Ghost Tales Podcast.